The DNA results came back on a Tuesday, and they proved that the boy Kang Hyun-woo had been searching for across 3 continents for 7 years was not his son. The boy's name was Tabena. He was 8 years old. He had been found 11 days earlier by a private investigator working a cold trail through Africa, Accra, and finally Ibadan, following a thread so thin it had almost not been a thread at all, a surname on a school enrollment record, a photograph uploaded to a community Facebook page by a church in Bodija, a child's face in the back row of a choir photograph that had made the investigator stop scrolling at 2 a.m. and call his client regardless of the hour. Kang Hyun-woo had flown from Seoul to Africa within 18 hours. He had sat in a hotel room in Victoria Island for 4 days while the legal framework for a DNA sample was established, because taking a child's DNA without the consent of his guardian was not something he was willing to do regardless of how certain he was, regardless of what his chest felt like every time he looked at the photograph. He had been certain. He had been more certain than he had been of anything in 7 years, which was a low bar in some respects and an extraordinary one in others, because 7 years of searching had taught him the specific, grinding discipline of not being certain, of holding every lead at arm's length, of requiring evidence before he allowed himself to feel anything, because the feeling cost something he did not have infinite reserves of. And then the results had come back, and the boy was not his son, and Kang Hyun-woo had sat in the hotel room in Victoria Island with the document on his phone, and had not moved for a very long time. This is where Adaora Nwosu found him. She was not supposed to find him. She was a family law consultant working with the Africa office of a Korean African legal firm, and she had been assigned to the Kang file 6 weeks earlier as the local legal liaison, the person who handled the African side of the framework, the consent documentation, the chain of custody for the DNA sample, the bureaucratic architecture that made the test legally admissible. She had done this work for 4 years. She had worked with families in various configurations of hope and grief, and she had learned to do her job with the specific, protective professional distance that the work required, because the work was the kind that got into you if you let it, and you could not afford to let it. She had not been planning to go to the hotel. She had sent the results electronically at 9:47 a.m. with a standard cover note, formal, clear, precise about what the results showed and what the next procedural steps were. She had done this correctly. She had done her job. At 2:34 p.m., he had not responded to the email. He had not responded to the follow-up message from the firm's senior partner. He had not responded to the call from the investigator. The investigator had called her, which was outside the formal chain, and had said, "I think someone should go to the hotel." She had gone. The hotel room door had been answered after the 3rd knock, which was long enough that she had been formulating contingency plans and short enough that the contingency plans had not been necessary. He had opened the door in the clothes he had apparently been wearing since the previous day. He was 41 years old, and the photographs she had seen of him in the file, the official ones, the press photographs, the photographs that accompanied the profile of Kang Group chairman in financial publications, had prepared her for someone who carried his authority visibly. The man in the doorway was not carrying anything visibly. He looked like a person who had had something very heavy removed and was not yet sure what the removal had left in its place. "Mr. Kang," she said. "I'm Adaora Nwosu, from the legal firm." He looked at her for a moment. "I know who you are," he said. His Korean was not the issue. His English was precise, the English of someone who had spent years in international business and for whom the language had become as natural as a tool that has been well used. "Come in." She came in. The room had the specific quality of a space that has been occupied by a person in distress. Not disordered, not messy, but subtly wrong in the way that rooms become when their occupant has stopped interacting with them and is simply existing inside them. The curtains were half open. The food that had apparently been delivered at some point was on the table untouched. The phone was on the bed, face up, with the email visible on the screen. She sat down in the chair by the window. She did not sit on the side of the bed near the phone. She did not suggest he sit. She waited. He sat on the edge of the bed. He looked at the phone. He said, "He has the same eyes." "Yes," she said. "I saw the photograph. The same jaw. The same." He stopped. He looked at the wall. "My wife said that I was seeing what I needed to see. She said it every time. Every lead." She said, "Hyun-woo, you are building a face out of hope and then finding it in other children's faces." He was quiet for a moment. She was right. She was right about this one too. Adaora said nothing. She had learned, in 4 years of this work, that the most valuable thing you could offer someone at this specific moment was the absence of language. Not silence, presence. The active, attentive presence of another person who is not going to fill the moment with something inadequate. His name is Tabena, he said. He's 8 years old. He's in 3rd grade at a school in Bodija. His favorite subject is mathematics. He looked at his hands. The investigator told me. I asked. I wanted to know who he was before he stopped. He found the word. Before I knew he wasn't mine.
He has a family, Adaora said.
Quietly, the investigator confirmed. Both parents present, a grandmother, 2 younger siblings.
Yes, he said.
I know. A pause. He's happy. That matters. She looked at him. It does, she said. That matters a great deal. He looked at her. It was the first time in the conversation that he had looked at her directly rather than at the phone or the wall or his hands, and the look had the quality of someone who has been alone with a very large thing, and is only now registering that another person is in the room. Why did you come? He said. The firm could have sent a message.
They did, she said.
You didn't respond. The investigator was concerned. I'm not, he stopped. I was not in a state to respond.
I know, she said. You came anyway, he said.
Yes, she said. He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he looked at the untouched food on the table. Then he said, When did you last eat? She blinked. Of all the things she had expected this conversation to produce, this was not among them.
This morning, she said.
Before I came here. That food is from this morning, he said. You could have it if you want. I'm not going to. She looked at the food. She looked at him. She said, I'll order something fresh if you'll eat it. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his expression, something she could not precisely name, but which had the quality of a person being offered something small and ordinary and finding it, in this specific moment, more than they were prepared for. All right, he said. She ordered. They waited. The food arrived. They ate, not together in any formal sense, but in the same room at the same time, which was its own category of together. She ate her jollof rice, and he ate approximately half of the grilled chicken he had ordered without apparently noticing he was eating it, which she filed as sufficient. When the food was finished, he said, Tell me about the process. What comes next? Procedurally, she said, the DNA exclusion closes this particular search thread. There are no legal obligations outstanding. The investigation can be stood down on the African side. What happens on the broader search? She paused. That's your decision. Tell me something, he said. Honestly, in 4 years of doing this work, have you seen anyone find what they were looking for? She sat with the question. She gave it the honest attention it deserved rather than the reflexive reassurance it would have been easy to offer.
Yes, she said. Twice.
Out of, she paused. 11 similar cases. 2 out of 11, he said. Yes, she said. He nodded. Not the nod of someone receiving devastating information, but the nod of someone receiving information they had already suspected and are confirming against the external record. And the other 9, he said. What did they do? Some kept looking, she said.
Some stopped.
Some found a way to hold both at once, to continue living while the search continued in the background. She paused. The ones who did best were the ones who found something to build while they were searching, who didn't make the search the only thing. He was quiet for a long moment. My wife said that too, he said. Before she left, Adaora went still. This was not in the file. The file said, divorced 3 years ago. It did not say the shape of the divorce. It did not say before she left. She said, he continued, slowly, that she had watched me disappear into the search. That every year there was less of me that was present and more of me that was somewhere out there in the search, and that she had been waiting for me to come back and had finally understood that coming back required the search to end, and the search was not going to end. He looked at the window. She was not wrong. She was not wrong about anything. She left, and I understood why she left, and I have been, he stopped. I have been alone with the search for 3 years. Mr. Kang, she said.
Hyun-woo, he said. Please. She paused.
Hyun-woo, when did your son go missing?
7 years ago, he said.
He was 14 months old. He looked at the phone. He was with his nanny, in the park near our house in Gangnam. There was a moment of inattention. Standard stroller in a park. And then there was not.
He paused.
The police investigation established that a vehicle had been seen leaving the area. There were witnesses. The investigation went on for 2 years. It produced nothing prosecutable. And then you continued privately, she said. And then I continued privately, he said. With the investigator. With the resources I had. I have spent, he stopped.
He seemed to decide something.
I have spent a significant portion of my personal fortune on the search. Not the company's resources. My own. That seemed important. That it was mine to spend.
She sat with this.
She thought about 7 years. She thought about 2 out of 11. She thought about a man who had been alone with the search for 3 years and who had come to Africa and sat in a hotel room for 4 days waiting for a test result that told him the face was not the face. Tebena is happy, she said again. Not as reassurance. As something else. Yes, he said.
And you are somewhere, she said.
He looked at her. Somewhere, he said, with the specific, dark humor of someone who is in too much pain to be angry but has retained enough of himself to recognize the accuracy of an understatement. You're in Africa, she said, which is a city I know very well. And it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which means there are approximately 4 hours of useful daylight left, and I think, she paused. She was about to say something that was outside the scope of her professional role, and she knew it, and she said it anyway. I think you should not be in this room for those 4 hours. He looked at her. Where should I be? Somewhere that isn't this room, she said. I can make a suggestion, or you can tell me what you want. He looked at her for a long moment. The look of a man who is very tired and very alone, and has just been asked a question so simple that its simplicity is almost painful. You make the suggestion, he said. She took him to the market. Not a tourist market, not the curated, photographed version of Africa that the hotel's concierge would have suggested. The Bodija Market, which was 40 minutes from the island and which smelled of pepper and fresh cloth and the specific, layered density of a place where everything necessary was available and everyone necessary was present. She had grown up going to Bodija with her mother on Saturday mornings. She knew where the pepper seller kept the best Cameroon pepper and where the fabric stalls had the prints that weren't available elsewhere and where the man who sold smoked fish had been selling smoked fish from the same spot for 30 years. She did not take him there because it was therapeutic. She took him there because it was real, and real was what this moment needed, and she understood this with the instinct of someone who has spent 4 years in proximity to grief and has learned what grief requires at its acute edges. He walked through the market without speaking for a long time. She walked beside him, without speaking either. She bought pepper. She greeted the fabric seller by name. She stopped at the smoked fish stall and spoke in Yoruba briefly with the man who had been there for 30 years, and when she turned back, Hyun-woo was looking at a bolt of Ankara fabric with the concentrated attention of someone who has found something to look at and is grateful for it. It's called Ankara, she said. The pattern is a dyer. It's a Yoruba resist dyeing tradition. Each pattern means something different. He looked at her. What does this one mean? He pointed at the bolt he had been looking at, deep blue and white, with a geometric pattern that had a specific, recursive quality. That one is about water, she said. About the way water finds its path. It always finds its path. He looked at the fabric for a moment longer. Then he said, Can I buy it? She looked at him. Yes, she said. Of course. He bought 3 meters of it. He carried it under his arm for the rest of the time in the market, which was another hour, during which he began to talk. Not about the search, not directly. He talked about his son the way you talk about someone when the specific, daily details of them are what you miss most. The way he had held his bottle with both hands, the very specific thing he did with his face when he was about to fall asleep, the fact that at 14 months he had already developed a strong preference for music over silence, and would turn his head toward any sound that had a rhythm. He talked about these things with the careful precision of a man who has been protecting them, keeping them exact, keeping them in the specific, sharp condition that memory requires if it is going to be reliable over 7 years. She listened. She listened with the full quality of her attention, which was considerable, and she did not offer anything in return except the occasional question that proved she had been following the geography of what he was saying. When they left the market, the sun was going down over Africa in the way it did in November, fast and orange and specific, the sky becoming the specific shade of amber that she had been trying to explain to a colleague from Seoul once and had eventually given up on explaining because some things required being present for. He stopped on the pavement outside the market and looked at the sky. My wife used to say, he said quietly, that you could tell the quality of a city by its sunsets. She said Seoul sunsets were beautiful, but they were city sunsets, beautiful in spite of a city. She said the cities where the sunset was beautiful because of the city were different cities. Africa has that, Adaora said. Yes, he said. He was still looking at the sky. I can see that. They stood there until the amber became dark. Then she took him to a suya spot she had been going to since university, and they ate suya standing at the counter in the specific, uncomplicated way of people who are hungry and the food is good, and the moment does not require anything more than that. Walking back to the car, he said, "Thank you."
For the suya, she said. For the afternoon, he said. For not, he stopped.
He found it. For not treating me like a file. She looked at him. "You're not a file," she said.
No, he said.
But I've been treated like one for 7 years. Legal teams and investigation teams and medical teams, and he paused. Everyone with a role. No one with just, he stopped again.
Presence, she said.
Yes, he said. Presence. She looked at the street. She thought about presence and the absence of it and the specific, costly thing it was to give someone your full attention without a role attached to it. She thought about her professional distance and the moment she had decided to go to the hotel and the way that decision had, in the course of an afternoon, produced something she was not sure she had professional categories for. "I'll be in Africa for another week," he said. "The investigator has some loose threads to close here before the search, before I decide what the search does next."
Yes, she said.
"The firm will be available for whatever legal support." "I didn't mean the firm," he said. He looked at her directly. "I meant, would you show me more of your city? Not the file version. The real version." She looked at him. She thought about professional distance and the specific architecture of what she had agreed to when she took this job. She thought about 2 out of 11 and a man who had been alone with a search for 3 years and had carried a bolt of Ankara fabric through a market in Bodija without knowing what it was for. "Yes," she said. "I can do that. Subscribe right now because what comes next is going to change everything about the story." The week that followed had the quality of something being built carefully and in full awareness that it was being built. She showed him Africa. Not the version the hotel recommended, the version she knew. She took him to her mother's house in Surulere on a Sunday afternoon, which was either a significant choice or a practical one depending on how you looked at it, and which was both. Her mother, Mama Nwosu, was 71 years old and had the specific, comprehensive authority of a woman who had raised 4 children and buried a husband and survived the specific, grinding adventure of Africa with her humor intact. She looked at Hyun-woo for approximately 30 seconds when he walked through her gate and then said, in Yoruba, to Adaora, "This one has suffered." Adaora said, also in Yoruba, "Yes, Mama. He's looking for a son." Her mother looked at him again. Then she said in English, "Come inside. I'm making egusi soup. You look like someone who needs to eat properly." Hyun-woo looked at Adaora. Adaora said, "She's right. Come inside." He ate egusi soup for the first time and received from Mama Nwosu a thorough and unsolicited education in the history of the Nwosu family's relationship with Africa, which spanned 3 generations and contained several stories that Adaora had not heard before and suspected her mother was inventing on the spot. Hyun-woo listened to all of it with a genuine, full attention that was, Adaora had begun to understand, his natural mode when he was not performing the controlled authority of the boardroom version of himself. At one point her mother said to him, with the directness of someone who has earned the right to direct questions through decades of asking them, "Your son, how old is he now? If he's alive." The room went very quiet. Adaora felt the specific tension of a moment that has been handled wrong before it has been handled. Hyun-woo looked at her mother. He said, 8. He would be 8. Then he's old enough to know things, her mother said. Children that age know who they are. They know their name. They know their people. Wherever he is, he knows. She looked at Hyun-woo with the specific, steady look of a woman who has thought about the weight of things and is not afraid of it. Don't let them tell you, he doesn't know. Hyun-woo was very still for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you." "Eat the soup," her mother said. "Then we'll talk." They stayed for 3 hours. When they left, walking to the car in the specific warm density of a surreal Sunday evening, Hyun-woo was quiet for a block and then said, "Your mother is extraordinary." "Yes," Adaora said. "She knows it." "She said what she meant," he said. Without arranging it first, "She's been saying what she means for 71 years, Adaora said. "She's gotten very efficient at it." He smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile, the real kind, not the polite version that appeared at the edges of professional interactions. It arrived without preparation, which was the only way real smiles did. She filed it. On the Monday, he came to her office. She had not asked him to come to the office. She had given him her card with the office address as part of the standard client handover at the beginning of the engagement, which was standard procedure and not an invitation. He appeared at reception at 10:30 with the ankle fabric under his arm and a question. He said, "I want to understand the legal framework for the continuing search. Not the investigative side, the legal side. If my son was taken and moved across borders, what are the international legal instruments that apply?" She sat with him in the conference room for 2 hours and went through the framework. Hague Convention, bilateral agreements between Korea and Africa, Interpol's missing persons mechanisms, the specific legal status of evidence gathered across jurisdictions. She was thorough and he was a quick study. He asked precise questions and received precise answers, and by the end of the 2 hours had a more detailed understanding of the legal landscape than most clients she had worked with in 4 years. At the end he said, "You're very good at this."
"Thank you," she said.
"How did you end up in this area?" he said. "Family law. Missing persons."
She paused.
She considered how much of this was within the scope of a professional conversation and decided that it was all within the scope of a professional conversation, and that this was, in any case, a conversation that was no longer operating purely within professional boundaries.
"My brother," she said.
"When I was 17, he was 22. He went to work one morning and didn't come back. It wasn't a missing person situation in the dramatic sense. He had made a choice, or something had happened to him. We were never certain which. My family spent 3 years looking."
She paused.
"We found him eventually.
He was in Benin City.
The details are his to tell, not mine. But I understood in those 3 years what it was like to be a family inside a legal system that was not designed for the specific kind of searching you were doing." He was looking at her.
"What did you do with that understanding?" he said.
"I went to law school," she said. "And then I came back to Africa, and I found the intersection of family law and international missing persons, and I built a practice in it." She paused. So that other families had someone in the system who understood from inside what the system felt like. He was very still. "You built the thing that would have helped your family," he said. "Yes," she said. "I did the same thing," he said. "After my son disappeared. The investigation had produced nothing in the first year, and I understood that the existing systems were not designed for what I needed. I funded a new private investigation unit, not the standard kind, specifically designed for international child recovery cases. I hired the people and built the protocols," and he stopped. He looked at his hands. "It has helped other families. 7 recoveries in 6 years." She looked at him. "You built the thing," she said. "Yes," he said. They sat with that for a moment. The specific, strange recognition of 2 people who have responded to loss in the same language. She said, 7 recoveries. That's not nothing."
"No," he said.
"It's not." He looked at the table. "But it's not him." "No," she said. "It's not." She looked at him across the conference table. She thought about 2 out of 11 and the bolt of Ankara fabric and her mother saying, "Don't let them tell you, he doesn't know." She thought about what it meant to build the thing that would have helped you and spend 7 years running it for other families while still searching for your own. She thought about the specific, complicated category this man occupied. Not the file, not the client, not the billionaire from the financial publications. The person.
Hyun-woo, she said.
He looked up. Tell me about the day before, she said. The day before he went missing. What were you doing? He went still. Why, he said. Because you've been living in the search for 7 years, she said. And the search is about what happened, and what might have happened, and what might still happen. And I want to know who you were the day before the search started. When you were just his father. He was very quiet for a long time. She let the silence run. She had learned to let silences run. We had gone to the park the day before, he said finally. The same park. The three of us, me and my wife and June.
He loved the fountain.
He would watch it for 20 minutes without moving, which was extraordinary for a 14-month-old, this absolute stillness he had in front of moving water.
He paused.
My wife took a video. He's standing at the edge of the fountain, and he looks up at the camera, and he laughs. He laughs exactly the way she laughs. That specific laugh that starts in the eyes before it reaches the mouth. He paused. I have watched that video every day for 7 years. She said nothing. She let him have the moment. He would be 8, he said. He would be in 2nd or 3rd grade. He would probably still love water. Children carry things like that. The things they loved very early, they tend to carry them. He looked at the table. I have made up versions of who he is now. I know it's not healthy, constructing a person who may or may not exist in the form I'm constructing. But the alternative is to let the 8-year-old be entirely unknown to me, and I can't, he stopped. I can't do that. What is he like, she said. In the version you've made. He looked at her. The question had surprised him. She could see it. It was not the question he had expected. It was probably not the question most people asked. He's serious, he said. He takes things seriously. He asks questions until he understands things completely, which drives his teachers slightly crazy but means he actually understands them. He's better at mathematics than I was at his age. He paused. He looked at the window. He knows how to be quiet in a way that makes the people around him feel that the quiet is comfortable, that they don't need to fill it. He looked back at her. He got that from his mother. She held his gaze. She thought about what it meant to construct a child for 7 years, to fill in daily with the materials of hope and knowledge and the specific, preserved memory of 14 months of actual presence, the shape of a person you cannot find.
He sounds real, she said.
The version you've made. He sounds like a real person. He is a real person, he said. Somewhere. He's real somewhere.
Yes, she said.
He is.
Subscribe.
Stay right here because the story is about to turn. The turn came on the Thursday of that week, which was not a turn she had anticipated, and which arrived the way the most significant turns did. Not dramatically, not with warning, but through a detail so small that its smallness was almost the thing that caused it to be missed. She had been reviewing a separate case file, a Ghanaian family, a different kind of missing person situation, when her assistant brought her a note. The note was from the investigator on the Kang case, who had found something in the process of closing the African search threads. A record, administrative, from a government registry office in Oyo State. A registration of birth from 9 years ago, slightly premature, dated 7 months before Kang Jun's disappearance, for a child whose birth had been registered in Oyo State by a Korean national whose identification documentation was listed in the registry. The name on the identification was not Kang Hyun-woo. It was his wife's name. His ex-wife's name. The woman who had taken the child to the park. The woman who had, 3 years ago, told him she was leaving because she could not continue to watch him disappear into the search. Adaora sat with this document for a long time. She thought about what it meant. She thought about the multiple interpretations available, some innocent, some not. She thought about her professional obligation, which was clear. She had information relevant to her client's case, and she was required to share it. She thought about the human dimension of what sharing it would produce, which was less clear and more significant. She called Hyun-woo. She said, I need you to come to the office.
Now.
He was there in 20 minutes. He came in and looked at her face and said, What is it? She put the document on the table in front of him.
He sat down.
He read it. He read it twice. The room was very quiet. Outside the window, Africa was doing its full, layered, unceasing thing, which it did regardless. Her name, he said. Very quietly. Yes, Adaora said. In Oyo State, he said. 9 years ago. Yes. He was born 7 months before. He stopped. He looked up. His face was doing something she had not seen it do, something beneath the controlled surface, something that was not grief and not anger but the specific, physical sensation of a reality that has been known from one direction revealing itself to have another direction entirely. She was in Africa, he said. 9 years ago. The registry records show a registration in Oyo State, Adaora said carefully. The identification used was her name. What the registration means, the full context of it, that requires investigation. She told me, he said slowly, that the day it happened she had turned her back for one moment. She told me there was a vehicle seen leaving the area. She was the one who reported it. She was the one who called me. He looked at the document. She was the one who cried at the police station. She was the one who sat with me for 2 years of the investigation. He looked up. She was the one who left when she said the search was consuming me. Hyun-woo, Adaora said. She left 3 years ago, he said. And, at that point the most recent search, had been in Southeast Asia. She left and the search moved to Southeast Asia, and then to South America, and then to West Africa, and he stopped. He looked at the document again. And now there is a registry record in Oyo State with her name on it, dated 9 years ago, 7 months before my son went missing. He sat very still for a long time. She let him. She had learned to let people sit with things. Then he said, she knew where he was. It was not a question. It was the specific, terrible clarity of a thing that has been arrived at through the only logical path available, a thing that you do not want to be true, and that is true regardless. We don't know that yet, Adaora said. The registry record is a starting point. The document establishes presence in Oyo State 9 years ago. What it establishes beyond that requires investigation. She was in Africa, he said. With documentation. Registration documentation. 7 months before he disappeared. Yes, Adaora said. That's what the record shows. And she never told me, he said. No, Adaora said. She didn't. He stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there looking at Africa with his back to her, and she watched the specific quality of a person absorbing a betrayal, not the hot, immediate kind, but the cold, restructuring kind, the kind that requires you to rebuild your understanding of 7 years of your life from a new foundation. I need to call her, he said. Yes, Adaora said. Before you do, I want to be present for that call if you're willing. Not to intervene. To document. If what the registry record suggests is accurate, whatever she says in that call is going to be important to the legal process.
He turned.
He looked at her. You think it's accurate, he said.
She paused.
She gave the honest answer rather than the protected one. I think the registry record is real, she said. I think the registration happened. What it means is what the call will tell us. He sat back down. He took out his phone. He looked at it for a long moment, the look of a man who is about to make a call that is going to divide his life into before and after. He called. She answered on the 4th ring. Her name was Song Yuri. Adaora knew this from the file, and her voice on speakerphone had the specific, careful quality of someone who has been expecting a call and has been expecting it for some time. He said, I'm in Africa. A silence. The silence of someone who has been waiting for a specific thing and has just heard it. I know, she said. 2 words. He closed his eyes. He opened them. Tell me, he said. Another silence. Longer. Then, he's safe. He's been safe. Her voice broke slightly at the edges. He doesn't know. He thinks he has a family. He's had a family the whole time. He doesn't know who he is. Where is he? Hyun-woo said. His voice was completely level. The level of a person who has placed everything they have on maintaining the level and is spending it all on this one moment. Ibadan, she said. He's in Ibadan. He's been in Ibadan for 6 years. Adaora went very still. Ibadan. The church choir photograph. The boy named Tebena. The boy, she said, before she had decided to say it. The DNA test. The boy the investigator found in Bodija. Song Yuri heard her voice.
Who is that? She said.
My lawyer, Hyun-woo said. He looked at Adaora. Tell me what you're thinking. The DNA test excluded Tabena as your biological son, Adaora said carefully. But the test established no other genetic relationship. It only tested for the one hypothesis.
She paused.
If your son was raised in the same community, in the same family network, if Tabena is a cousin, a neighbor, a family friend. He's his cousin, Song Yuri said through the phone. Very quietly. Tabena is the son of the family that raised June. They live 2 streets apart. June is, his name here, is Emeka. He was registered as Emeka Okafor. The room was completely silent. Hyun-woo sat with a phone on the table and Adaora watched his face do something she had no category for, something that was 7 years of search and 3 years alone and 14 months of a boy at a fountain who laughed the way his mother laughed, all of it arriving at once in the specific, total way of a thing that has been waited for so long that when it arrives it is too large for any single expression. He said, very quietly, Is he happy?
A pause.
Then Song Yuri said, with the specific, breaking quality of a person who has been carrying something for 7 years and is setting it down whether she intended to or not. Yes. He's happy, Hyun-woo. He's a happy child. He loves mathematics. He's serious and he asks questions until he understands things. He's real, Hyun-woo said. He's real somewhere. Yes, she said. He's real. He's 2 streets from the boy your investigator found. Adaora picked up her phone. She sent one message to the investigator. It said, Emeka Okafor, Bodija area, Ibadan. Treat as priority. I'll explain when I call. She put her phone down. She looked at Hyun-woo. He was looking at the window. His face was doing the thing she had no category for, and she understood that there was no category for it because there was no ordinary human experience that produced this specific combination, the finding after 7 years, of the thing that was found, wrapped in the simultaneous discovery of how it had been lost.
Hyun-woo, she said.
He looked at her. The legal process from here is going to be complex, she said. International family law, the question of the existing registered family in Africa, the child's own understanding of his identity. It's going to require time and care, and it's not going to be fast.
I know, he said.
But the first step, she said, is knowing where he is. And you know where he is. He looked at her. The look of a man who has just been told, after 7 years, that the answer was always within reach of the question. 2 streets from Tabena, he said. Yes, she said.
He sat with that for a long time.
Then he said, I need to go to Ibadan. Not tonight, she said. The investigator needs to establish the situation first. We need the legal framework in place before any contact. If you go tonight without the framework. I know, he said. I know. He looked at the table. Tomorrow? Tomorrow I'll know more, she said. Give me tonight. He nodded. He sat in the conference room with the document and the phone and the specific, enormous quiet of someone who is no longer searching because the search has ended, which is its own kind of disorientation, the disorientation of a person who has organized their entire existence around emotion and has suddenly been given permission to stop. She had not expected to see him the following morning. She had told him to give her the night. She had meant it practically. She needed the night to build the framework, and the framework required time, and his presence in her office while she built it would not accelerate the framework and would cost them both something in the specific, accumulated way that proximity to a person in acute pain costs the people near them. She had said it clearly, and she had meant it, and she had expected him to go back to the hotel. He was on the steps of her office building at 7:15 in the morning with 2 cups of coffee, and the ankle fabric and the specific, contained quality of a man who has not slept and has decided that not sleeping is better done near the person he is trusting with the most important thing he has. She looked at him from the building's entrance. She looked at the 2 cups. She said, How long have you been here? Since 5, he said. I walked for 2 hours first. Africa at 5 in the morning is, he paused. It's very honest. Yes, she said. It is. She took the coffee. Come inside. He came inside. He sat in the waiting area while she reviewed the materials she had assembled during the night. She did not ask him to leave. She worked with the awareness of his presence in the next room, which was not distracting in the way that presences could be distracting but was the other kind. The kind that sharpens you, that makes the work feel like it has a weight and a purpose beyond itself. At 8:15, she brought him into the office and walked him through the framework. The legal situation in Africa is this, she said. Emeka Okafor has been registered as the child of the Okafor family for 8 years. That registration has legal standing. Contesting it requires a formal petition to the family court in Oyo State, supported by DNA evidence and documentary evidence of the original identity.
She paused.
The DNA test you've already conducted excludes Tebena as your son, but does not establish Emeka's identity. We'll need a separate test, with proper consent from the Okafor family. Will they consent? He said. That depends on how we approach them, she said. If we approach through the legal framework, court order, formal petition, it becomes adversarial and the child is caught in the middle. If we approach through conversation first, through explanation, she paused. The Okafor family may not know the full history of how Emeka came to them. They may have received a child through channels that presented themselves as legitimate. They may, in other words, also be in a position that was created for them rather than by them.
He sat with this.
Song Yuri arranged it, he said. That's the most likely explanation for the registry record, she said carefully. We don't have the full picture of how Emeka arrived with the Okafor family. What we know is that a registration was made in Oyo State 9 years ago using Song Yuri's identification. The 6 years the Okafors have been in Ibadan suggests they received the child approximately 2 years after the registration. She arranged it for 2 years before she gave him away, he said. That's one interpretation, she said. What's another, he said. She paused. She considered her words carefully. The registration 9 years ago could have been preparatory, she said. The act of someone who was planning something and building the pieces of it. Or it could have been the act of someone who was in a situation she couldn't see a way out of and was constructing an exit. She looked at him. I don't know which it was. I don't know what was happening in your marriage 9 years ago.
He was quiet for a long time.
9 years ago, he said slowly, we were trying for a second child. We had been trying for 2 years. He stopped. He looked at the window. There were difficulties. Medical difficulties. The period was difficult. She was under a great deal of pressure that I did not fully understand at the time. He stopped again. I was building the company, the critical growth phase. I was present in the marriage, but I was not fully present. There is a difference. Yes, she said. There is. She was trying to tell me something during that period, he said. I understood this afterward. At the time I understood that she was distressed, and I tried to address the distress, and I did not address the underlying thing because I did not know what the underlying thing was. He looked at her. She never told me directly. She left, eventually, without telling me directly. And now I am discovering that there was something else she never told me directly, he stopped. Which was apparently the most significant thing. Hyun-woo, she said. He looked at her. When the legal framework is in place and the child question is resolved, she said, you are going to have a conversation with Song Yuri that is going to be one of the most difficult conversations of your life. Not because it is legally necessary, it isn't necessarily, but because you are going to need to understand what happened and why, and that understanding is going to require her to tell you things she has been holding for 9 years. She paused. I want you to be prepared for the possibility that what she tells you is going to be more complicated than the story you currently have. He looked at her. You're telling me not to arrive at that conversation with a verdict already written. I'm telling you, she said carefully, that the people I've worked with who were best able to move through things like this were the people who kept the understanding of the thing separate from the judgment of it for long enough to actually understand it. She paused. Judgment can come later. Understanding has to come first. He looked at her for a long moment. That's not what lawyers usually tell their clients, he said. No, she said. It isn't. You're telling me this as something else, he said. I'm telling you this, she said carefully, as someone who has spent 4 years watching what happens when people skip the understanding and go straight to the verdict. And as someone who, she paused, as someone who would like the version of you that comes through this to still be the person I have been talking to this week. He was very still. That's a personal statement, he said. Yes, she said. It is. She picked up the framework document. But today is about the child. That's the conversation we're having today.
Yes, he said.
Today is about Emeka. She looked at the document. He looked at the document. The morning outside her window was becoming the specific, full Africa morning that started early and accelerated quickly, the city finding its daily volume.
One more thing, she said.
Yes. When we get to the Okafor house, she said, and when you see him, when you see Emeka, I need you to understand that he is a child who has a family he loves and a life he knows and an identity that is his regardless of the documentation. The legal process will establish the truth of his origins. That process will take time, and it will require care, and it will require, she paused. It will require you to be in it for the long version. Not the version where the search ends, and you bring him home next week. The version where the search ends, and then the real work begins. He held her gaze. I know, he said. I've been thinking about nothing else since yesterday. He paused. He has a family. He has a life. Whatever I am to him, whatever I become to him, it is going to be built carefully. Not claimed. Built. She looked at him. She thought about the man who had funded a recovery unit for other people's children, who had understood from the beginning that this was not a thing to be claimed. Yes, she said. Built. She went back to the document. He sat in the chair across from her desk. The morning moved around them, and the framework for the most important afternoon of 7 years took its shape in the careful, practiced hands of a woman who had spent 4 years building the thing that would have helped her family. She worked through the night. She called the investigator and the firm's senior partner and the international family law specialist she kept on retainer for exactly these situations. She built the framework, the consent processes, the legal documentation, the notification requirements, the child welfare protocols that governed any contact between a biological parent and a child who had been raised in a different family structure and did not know his own history. She also, in the hours between the calls, sat in her office with the case file and thought about Song Yuri. She thought about a woman who had taken her child to a park and had made a choice that was a crime. That was also, in some architecture of motivation she could not fully see from the outside, the choice of someone who had wanted something that she had not been able to ask for directly. She thought about the 3 years Song Yuri had sat in the search with him, crying at the police station, managing the investigation, watching her husband disappear into the things she had created. She thought about leaving 3 years ago, leaving him alone with a search she had built. She thought about what it meant to do a wrong thing and live inside the consequences of it for 7 years. She was not excusing it. She was a lawyer and she understood what Song Yuri had done and what it was, and she was not excusing it. But she was also someone who had spent 4 years in proximity to the things people did when they were desperate, and she understood that desperation was not the same as evil, and that understanding the difference was part of doing this work correctly. At 4:17 a.m., she sent Hyun-woo a message. It said, "Framework is in place. We can go to Ibadan tomorrow afternoon." He replied within 1 minute, "I'll be at your office at noon." She put her phone down. She sat in the quiet of the office and thought about tomorrow and what tomorrow would produce and the specific, improbable journey from a hotel room in Victoria Island where a man could not move to an afternoon in Bodija Market and an egusi soup in Surulere and a registry record and a phone call and a child named Emeka who was 2 streets from Tabena. She thought about 2 out of 11. She thought about the bolt of Ankara fabric, which was still under his arm when he left the office. He had not put it down all day. She thought about water and the way it found its path. She thought about a pattern that meant it always finds its path. She allowed herself, carefully and with full awareness of what she was allowing, to think about him. Not the file. The person. The man who had funded a recovery unit that had found other people's children while he was still looking for his own. The man who had eaten suya standing at a counter because the moment didn't require anything more than that. The man who had asked her mother questions and received the answers with full attention and thanked her for saying what she meant. The man who, when she had asked what the 8-year-old version of his son was like, had described a child who knew how to be quiet in a way that made the people around him feel that the quiet was comfortable. She thought, that is also a description of the father. She thought about the professional distance she had agreed to when she took this job. She thought about when it had stopped being the thing she was operating from. She thought about the condition. Plain things, always. She was borrowing that from a different story, but it applied. She understood, going to have to be very careful about the order in which things happened. First, the child. The child was first, completely, and without any ambiguity. The legal process, the welfare protocols, the careful, unhurried work of introducing a boy named Emeka to the fact of his own history. That came first, and it came for as long as it took. And after, which was not tonight and was not tomorrow, and was not a timeline she was going to put a date on after, there were things she was going to have to say. Plain things. She sat in her office until the Africa dawn arrived through the window in the specific, irreversible way it did. Not gradually, not politely, but all at once, the city becoming visible in full detail as if it had been there all along, and the darkness had simply been hiding it. She made coffee. She looked at the file. She looked at the photograph of the church choir in Bodija, the back row, the child who had made the investigator stop scrolling. She thought about what it meant that the photograph had been from a church in Bodija, and the child in it was Tabena, and Emeka was 2 streets away. She thought about the investigator stopping at 2 a.m. to call his client. She thought about the specific, unlikely geometry of a search that had been looking for a child in 3 continents and had finally, through the thinnest of threads, found a face in the back row of a choir photograph in a city 40 minutes from a market where a man had bought 3 meters of Ankara fabric without knowing what it was for. She thought about water finding its path. At noon he came to the office. He was wearing the Ankara fabric, not his clothing, she realized looking at him, but folded over his arms still, carried, which was perhaps a form of keeping something close that was not entirely rational, and was entirely understandable. "Are you ready?" she said. "Yes," he said. He looked at her. "Are you?" She paused. She thought about the question under the question. "I'm your lawyer today," she said. "After today, we'll talk about the rest." He held her gaze. "All right," he said. "After today." The Okafor family received them with the specific, dignified caution of people who have been told something significant is happening and have decided to meet it with grace rather than defensiveness. The father, Emmanuel Okafor, was a secondary school mathematics teacher. She noted this and looked at Hyun-woo when she noted it and saw that he had noted it too. The mother, Chidinma, taught at the same school. They had 3 children, Emeka, who is 8, and 2 younger daughters, 6 and 4. The family had been in Ibadan for 6 years, having moved from Port Harcourt, and they had received Emeka. This was how Emmanuel Okafor described it, carefully and with the specific precision of a man who had thought about how to describe it, through a private adoption arrangement that had been presented to them by a Korean humanitarian organization whose documentation had appeared complete and legal at the time. She was taking notes. Beside her, Hyun-woo was listening with the full, complete quality of his attention, saying nothing, his hands still on the table. "We did not know," Emmanuel Okafor said, looking at Hyun-woo directly. "I want to say this clearly. We were told this child had been abandoned. We were told the biological parents were unknown. We were told all documentation was in order." He paused. "We loved him from the first week. He has been our son for 6 years. He is our son." He looked at Adaora. "But we are not people who would have accepted a child who belonged to someone who was looking for him. That is not who we are." "I believe you," Adaora said. "Whatever the legal process requires," Chidinma said, with the quiet, precise authority of a woman who has been listening to this conversation and has decided what she is going to say and is saying it. "We will cooperate. We want the truth to be established. We want Emeka to know the truth of his own life." She looked at Hyun-woo. "He deserves to know." Hyun-woo looked at her. He said, "Thank you." 2 words. Everything he had. Emeka was called in from the garden at that point. He had apparently been sent outside when the adults arrived, because the Okafors were the kind of parents who understood that some conversations happened before children were present, which told you something about the kind of parents they were. He came in with grass on his shoes and the focused, slightly impatient expression of a child who has been told to wait and has been waiting and considers the waiting concluded. He stopped when he saw Hyun-woo. He looked at him for a long time. The room was very quiet. Then he said, in the Yoruba-accented English of a child who has grown up in Ibadan, "You have the same eyes as me." And Hyun-woo knelt down. And the room held everything: 6 years of an Ibadan family and 7 years of a soul search, and the Ankara fabric on a chair, and the mathematics homework on the table, and Adaora's framework in her bag, and the specific, impossible, necessary truth of a child recognizing a face across 8 years of not knowing it was his face to recognize. She stood in the doorway, and let it be what it was. She thought about her brother. She thought about Benin City, and the 3 years of looking and the finding. She thought about what she had understood in those 3 years, that she had spent 4 years of practice turning into something useful for other people's families. She thought about what she was going to say to Hyun-woo when today was finished. She thought about after today. She thought, plain things. Always. She thought, it will keep. The drive back to Africa was quiet. The investigator was handling the next steps. The Okafor family had agreed to the DNA test, formally, with their lawyer present, which was the correct way, and would produce documentation that was unassailable. The process would take weeks. The legal petition would take months. The real work, the long version, the careful version, the version in which a child's understanding of his own life was expanded rather than demolished, would take years. Hyun-woo sat in the passenger seat and looked at the road and said nothing for a very long time. She drove. She did not fill the silence. She had learned, in the course of this week, that his silences were not empty and did not need to be filled. At some point he said, "He really does have my eyes." "Yes," she said. "He's serious," he said. "He's exactly as serious as I imagined he would be." "Yes," she said. "He was doing long division," he said. "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to learn Yoruba," he said. She looked at him briefly. "Why?" "Because he grew up speaking it," he said. "Because it's part of who he is. Because if I'm going to be in his life, if he allows me to be in his life, I want to be able to speak to him in all of his languages." He paused. "I have a lot of catching up to do." She looked at the road. She thought about catching up and the specific, long work of it. She thought about a man who had funded a recovery unit for 7 years and still had, apparently, the capacity to identify and commit to the next right thing immediately. "You'll be good at it," she said. The Yoruba. "You'll have to teach me," he said. She paused. "My Yoruba is decent," she said. "My Igbo is better. Emeka's family speaks Igbo at home." "Then teach me Igbo," he said. She looked at the road. "That would take some time," she said. "I have time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." The Africa skyline appeared on the horizon, the specific, layered, complicated silhouette of a city that was never just one thing. "Hyun-woo," she said. "Yes." "You said after today we would talk about the rest." A pause. "Yes," he said. "I said that." "Today isn't finished yet," she said. "But it's almost finished." "Yes," he said. "It is." She kept her eyes on the road. She thought about what she was going to say and how she was going to say it. She thought about plain things and the condition and the specific, quiet honesty of a week that had produced more real conversation than most years of her professional life. "When today is finished," she said carefully, "I am going to tell you that this week has been, that you are not a file, that I made a decision to go to a hotel room on a Tuesday afternoon that was outside my professional role, and I don't regret it, and I understand what that means about what this has become, and I think you should know that I understand it." He was quiet for a moment. "That's the beginning of the plain thing," he said. "Not the whole plain thing." "No," she said. "Not the whole plain thing. The whole plain thing requires today to be finished." "Then we should finish today," he said. "Yes," she said. "We should." The city arrived around them. She drove. He sat beside her with the Ankara fabric in his lap and the first real quiet she had seen in him all week, not the heavy quiet of a man alone with an impossible weight, but the specific, different quiet of someone who is, for the first time in a very long time, in the right place. She thought about water finding its path. She thought about after today, which was coming. She thought, it always finds its path. They drove to Ibadan together. The investigator met them on the street 2 houses from the address. He briefed them. The family had been contacted through a third party and had agreed to a meeting with the child present, with the understanding that the meeting was being conducted by a legal representative investigating a family documentation matter. The child did not know more than that. The child was 8 years old and was home from school and was, from the investigator's brief observation through the gate, doing mathematics homework at the kitchen table. Mathematics, Hyun-woo said, very quietly. Yes, the investigator said. Adaora looked at Hyun-woo. He was looking at the gate. She thought about 14 months of a boy at a fountain and the video he had watched every day for 7 years. She thought about the quiet that made the people around him feel comfortable. She thought about 8 years old and mathematics at a kitchen table and the fact that you could not, in any honest accounting, have predicted the specific, improbable path from a park in Gangnam to a kitchen table in Ibadan. When we go in, she said to him, quietly, so only he could hear, follow my lead on the legal part. Let me do the framework. When there's a moment, I'll tell you when there's a moment, then it's yours. He looked at her. Thank you, he said. Not for this specifically. For all of it. She received it that way. They went in. The child was at the kitchen table. He was 8 years old, and he had Hyun-woo's jaw and his mother's laugh that starts in the eyes, and he was doing long division with the focused, serious attention of a child who does not find mathematics difficult, but treats it with respect anyway. He looked up when they came in. He looked at Adaora first, then at the investigator, then at Hyun-woo. He looked at Hyun-woo for a long moment with the specific, precise attention of a child who is assessing something and has not yet decided what he has found. Then he said, in Yoruba-accented English, to no one specifically, you have the same eyes as me. The room was very quiet. Hyun-woo knelt down. He knelt down to the level of the child at the table, which put them at eye level, which confirmed what the child had said in the specific, total way of two people who have been looking at different mirrors their entire lives and are now, for the first time, looking at the same face. Yes, Hyun-woo said. Very quietly. I do. Adaora stood in the doorway of a kitchen in Ibadan and watched a man find the thing he had been looking for 7 years, and she thought about 2 out of 11, and about water finding its path, and about a bolt of Ankara fabric and the long, improbable, necessary route between a park in Gangnam and a kitchen table where someone was doing long division. She thought about after today. She thought about plain things. She thought, this is the beginning. This is the actual beginning of something, in this kitchen, with this child and this man at eye level and the mathematics homework and the specific, ordinary, extraordinary miracle of a face recognized across 8 years and 3 continents, and the thin thread of a choir photograph uploaded to a Facebook page by a church in Bodija. She thought about all the things she was going to say when today was finished. She thought, not yet, but soon. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next chapter is the hardest and the most important, and you're going to want to be there for it.